Hello, my dear listeners. In today's video, I will cover the Judy Shelton plan to back US Treasuries by gold. So I will analyze the few videos that are related to the subject, and at the end, stick until the end. Then there's really the interview taking with Judy Shelton, where she's covering, she's answering the most important questions, where we know why and how it's supposed to work. First, I would like to start with this fragment.
Are being backed by gold. So there's an argument that President Trump may issue U.S. Treasury bonds that are backed by gold. So it would work like this. The government asks you to lend them money, let's just say $4,000, and then they'll pay you back 1 ounce of gold in 30 years and in physical gold. So it would be a zero coupon convertible to gold at maturity. Okay, so why would the government do this? It's because they would be able to raise desperately needed money right now, and they wouldn't have to pay interest because they're going to pay you gold upon maturity. So this idea of gold-backed treasuries is coming from Judy Shelton.
Okay, so the author of this video are actually saying interesting thing, that they will not have to pay you interest. But where I listened later on, it's not how it's supposed to work. But it's all interesting concept and very interesting. He says desperately needed because well, the situation, if you don't know, that U.S. government has to refinance $11 trillion in the next 12 months, and this is the elephant in the room. So the $9 trillion of existing debt that is converting, and $2 trillion it's like projected deficit that normally ends up to be much higher than that. So this is lots of money and nobody has it, and there is a very dire situation that could trigger a major crisis. And there is a government really, like the word desperate is very important to this, because I don't think at this point they will do something like that until like things gets very bad. So let's listen another very interesting opinion.
Case that the U.S. dollar was backed by gold, and the U.S. government said, if you don't like these pieces of paper, we'll give you gold. And ultimately, we ended that. We're never going to go back to that, presumably, right?
Probably, presumably, that's right. But not if you watch these these cycles, that because you have the devaluation, then people don't have confidence in the fiat system over a period of time. And through history, they've at that point, the way that works is you print all this money, then you pay the debt with the cheap money, but nobody wants to hold it, so then they go back and link it again. It is conceivable that you can see a relinking of gold to money.
Okay, interesting. So again, the word that I wants to stand out for me is in the time of crisis, and is desperate. And if they have to do it, but it's not conceivable to do gold standard right now, because of course the government, like everyone who is thinking the government needs to print money, because the system, current system is like a car made to run on a gas, and if you want to make them it run on a natural gas or on diesel, you need a major reform. But if you put diesel into gas car, it won't work. So the same way the current system will not will not work simply if we apply the gold standard or gold legal tender or gold linked money. So in the times of crisis, whereas the confidence, like the word confidence, is compromised, the government will be forced. So I see it not like a preemptive measure, but it's the measure that will come after we see huge inflationary spike, or let's say interest on the American bonds goes to some unsustainable level, which I don't know what this can be. Let's say the 10-year maybe 6-7% or more, or maybe it's 5%. There is some psychological level, and especially in the amount of time that psychological level can be achieved. So I will be looking for those signs, but I don't see that the government by itself, if they allow to perpetuate the status quo, they will continue. That's why I will use this fragment for in my presentation. So the next thing is very interesting, the state of the current bond market, what is really happening.
soon, considering the UK is not far behind China. So China, Japan, and the Fed are all actively decreasing their exposure to US Treasuries, with China about to drop below the UK in terms of the total Treasuries it holds. Now, you might look at how many Treasuries the Fed owns, and just by looking at their total balance sheet, you might assume that they have a very large, historically speaking, balance of US Treasuries. But if instead we look at this as a percent of the total debt that is available, we can see that the Federal Reserve's holding of US Treasuries is back down to very close to average levels. The Fed owns about 15% of the US government's debt that is held by the public. And while that percentage has been pretty volatile, ranging from 7% up to 25% over the last 2 decades, being around 15% where it is right now is much closer to historical norms going back to 2003. This is one of the reasons why bond yields have continued to rise over the past few years, because US Treasuries are being sold by everyone to a much larger degree than they are being purchased. We are seeing US Treasuries be actively replaced around the world, especially on central bank balance sheets, and it is being replaced by gold. Now we know.
Okay, so he said the treasuries have been replaced by gold, and also if you go back to this graph about 15%, and the top was about how much treasuries the Federal Reserve actually own. So they've been selling them into quantitative tightening and then get down to 15%. For actually the peak, if you pay attention, there was about 25%. So the quarter of the treasury was monetized. That was the peak that brought the inflation. So that's another measurement. If it's a public information that is available for everyone, I think we could quickly revert, and if we see quantitative easing, and we revert back over 25%, that when we will see something, a major catalyst to look for this sign, maybe the shift that will force the government to do something gold related in the monetary system. So now Judy Shelton, I will use her fragment of her presentation that I found most important, and I will stop and comment on it as it goes through. Let's take a listen.
Fixed, like our allies could only have their currency move 1% up or down relative to whatever that fixed rate was. They had to keep it fixed. But if they felt the United States was inflating and exporting that inflation, those other countries who were participants in the Bretton Woods system, and this means all the European countries, not the Soviet Union, they were invited, but they opted out at the last minute. But these other countries would be able to cash in the extra dollars that were coming into their country for that $35 per ounce of gold rate. So that was the way to sort of keep bringing the system back to where it was meant to be. And that kind of enforced fiscal discipline on every government.
Okay, so it's very important point to resume how the gold standard worked before 1971. So you could exchange the excess of the printed dollars or the national currency in gold to reestablish the balance. So that's what is going on with China, between China, Russia, and India. So they are allowing each of these big countries to exchange of their currencies back to gold and rebalance. So this is whereas the monetization of gold is happening on Eastern Hemisphere, or in between the BRICS country, or between the Asian countries, not in the Western countries yet. But I think the Western countries will be forced to follow if they will want to participate in the international trade,
including the U.S. And that's a system we had. It worked extremely well. That is, the productivity gains all around the world, but in the United States were very impressive. We had good real economic growth, very low inflation, and we had a narrowing of the wealth gap. The inequality on wealth and income really started to decrease. So what do I think could happen now? I don't think you can go back to either of those systems. But what I'm proposing is that since the U.S. as a legacy of that system is the world's largest holder of gold reserves, we have 261 million ounces. We're carrying them at a book value of $42 an ounce. And they're worth considerably more. Our holdings are carried by the Treasury as being worth $11 billion. It's probably about $800 billion, getting closer to a trillion. And my idea is that for the first time since Nixon cut off any link between the value of the US dollar and gold, it would be interesting if our Treasury issued a new security, I call them Treasury trust bonds, that offered gold convertibility at maturity. And so when the bond would mature, the holder could either get the face value in dollars, or it would have been pre-established how much gold they could get. And I think in a way it's kind of a novelty. We're not talking about the whole money supply. This wouldn't be the smallest sort of Treasury offering that is out there, but it wouldn't be the smallest either. This would be like TIPS bonds in a way, which are Treasury inflation-protected securities. But I think it would get attention. And if you could then sort of compare the rate of return that investors demand when they know that they're holding in the future a dollar as good as gold, literally, because they know how much gold or how much dollars they can get in the future.
Okay, very important what she said here. So in her plan, these gold issues backed treasuries will pay the interest. They will not be interest free. So on top of the appreciation of gold, the government will have to pay the interest on those bonds. So that's a very important part.
Look at the interest rate demanded on that sort of Treasury offering relative to a normal Treasury offering, fiat money purely, with no convertibility aspects in the future except into future dollars. That could turn into a very useful information tool for the Fed because it measures aggregate expectations about the purchasing power of the dollar relative to gold, which is kind of a surrogate for commodities, and in that sense for the real economy. And it could also turn into some kind of a price rule in the future. That is when I talk about a gold standard, or I'm referred to as a gold bug, what I'm saying is why not use a link between the dollar and gold that is a win-win all around, including the bookkeeping value of gaining that windfall profit.
One thing I really like about your proposal is it's very sober, it's very calm, it's very relaxed. It's not saying, hey, we need to bring the whole monetary system to a screeching halt overnight and swap something over. It's not an attack on other countries or their currencies. It's simply saying, hey, we have a security like a TIPS, which is a treasury that is inflation protected. Why not have a currency or security that is also maybe debasement protected? So it's in something like gold or an asset that people can say, hey, I'm pretty sure in 20 years from now or 15 years from now, this gold will still have its value or maybe more value compared to the same.
Okay, so for now, I just want to add a comment here about those, treasuries backed by gold that will pay interest, because if you open that kind of worms, what it becomes difficult, because they will be competing with the existing bonds. So the existing bondholder, they will see the interest on the gold bonds, even if it's like 1 or 2%, and gold appreciation, possible 10, 20, 30%, 40%, wherever, per year, they will demand extremely higher rate on those bonds that are outstanding, like that on old bonds. So if you create artificial competition, it will accelerate the collapse on the bond market. That's my observation. What is the feasibility or the government interest, or again, if they will do this only if they have to, not because they want to fix something. If they will be coming after the crisis, because the government will need to borrow and some kind of short-term measures after their existing bond system already collapsed to reach some unsustainable level, or they even defaulted by inflation or by physical default on the outstanding debt.
In dollars, and just let people choose. If it turns out that nobody wants these securities, well, that'll be some information all its own. It won't cost us anything, and we'll learn, wow, people really trust the dollar. Or if people are buying these up like hotcakes, we'll also realize, wow, there's a strong demand for an asset that is paid by a government that we know will pay it out in a currency that isn't the dollar but is actually in gold. So what do you think is the strongest arguments against this? Why would someone not want to have this treasury trust bond or these securities that are denominated and paid in gold?
Well, first off, thank you for encapsulating it so well. That is exactly the concept, and as you say, it's voluntary. This is for people who want the assurance that they have future purchasing power, and for them, knowing they would have a certain amount of gold is a comfortable feeling, just like a TIPS bond where they know they'll be compensated by the consumer price index. This is doing it by the value of gold. I think some people, and this is kind of sad for me, their first reaction to it is to say, but I would never trust the government. I would never trust the government to live up to its promise. I think we can get around that. Certainly, you would have to warehouse the gold and to stipulate that is the collateral for this security. And you see people who want to take a tour through Fort Knox. I'm all for it. I don't think it's necessary, but I could be wrong. But I think even that would be a positive thing if it reassured people I would be more concerned not whether it's physically there, but about any encumbrances that we might not be aware of.
Okay, so any encumbrances that we might not be aware of. Even she said, okay, her statement, you should trust the government. She's kind of, Judy is kind of deceived the people not trusting the government. But here she actually said, like, she assumes that even the gold is there. There is ownership, the question of the ownership of the gold, which has been raised by many, and all the gold bugs, Malunian. So she's raising that question. So you should not trust the government, even if even if the gold is there. Is the question of the ownership has to be verified. So this is very big problem from the government, backing the gold. The first, before this system is began, they have to do 100% audit, and the audit has to, like, the most important part of the audit has to, even if the gold is there, like, they have to physically each bar say who owns it, if the government really owns it, or it's already collateralized, or somebody has a claim on that gold, because they cannot issue the government bond on the gold that is already pledged to somebody else.
But I think that that's part of issuing this, and I sort of want to use this whole exercise to bring attention to the importance of having an honest measure where people know you've defined the value of the dollar in terms of something that has an inherent value. And I think in that sense, you've made a statement on behalf of the importance of monetary integrity. And so for people for whom that's important, because some of us feel sort of victims of monetary policy, my problem, I guess, or my complaint is I don't see money as just another policy tool to be managed or manipulated by government to achieve its economic objectives. I think that money is almost like a human right. I mean, you have to be able to plan in your life. And money is meant to be that unit of account, so you can make plans.
Okay, so she raised very important questions here. So this, of course, it's an idealistic approach, but it has to go back that the money has to be stable, and that's creates very, that's a key foundation to the prosperity. Have a stable money, then we have kind of, we switch from speculation and financial economy to productive economy, where really the capital serves the people's need and turns into productive capacity. But there is many things that in her system, in this system, actually, like, she's doubting, it will be hardly implemented, because basically the government may not have the gold, or if they have the gold, they might not own the gold. Otherwise, I think they need to continue to print money, and the cost of those bonds will be, for the government, will be very dramatically higher compared to the current system, like, where they just press the button and create the money of the thin air. And the other thing is, it's very, like, who will not want the financial instruments, if the such instruments will be created by government, where you receive, a piece of paper that guarantees you amount of gold in the future and pays the interest on top, and you kind of feel 100% secure, and it's 100% transparent. They prove the gold is there, and you can walk some kind of facility with that piece of paper, or electronically send that claim and redeem it for, like, a gold eagle or something, like a government gold coin, something like that. So that will be very it will be very desirable, interesting in the market. Like, I will ask my audience, like, I will personally be very interested, and you could have bonds also dominated in silver, but if it's only gold, it will be great also. So, but we are far away from that, and please, that's going to be everything for this video, and please comment and like the video to support my work. Thanks for watching.